So about 10 or 11 years ago, I was helping out at this church in my hometown. I was leading worship, doing some graphic and design work, helping run the college group. I was, of course, unpaid, but a pretty instrumental part of what they were doing. Even though this was before my major deconstruction movement, I'd already felt myself pulling away from the evangelical scene because of all the nonsense that was going on. It was around that time I met my now wife, who lived in Michigan. Me living in Florida 1,200 miles away, we had to find fun ways to keep dating interesting. My wife and I are huge Harry Potter fans, so at the time, she decides to send me a cute, homemade Hogwarts acceptance letter. It was silly, it was cute, it was awesome. So, doing what most millennials do, I took a picture of it and I put it online. Not thinking much of it, I had a bunch of friends comment and say how cool it was, how cool she was, and just overall positive vibes. But within 24 hours of me posting that picture, the pastor at the church that I was working at sends me a text and tells me I need to meet him in his office later that day. It wasn't unusual for him to want to meet with me, as we would regularly talk about church happenings and just things that needed to get done. But this time was different. I sit down in his office, and for the next 30 to 45 minutes, he berates me on the fact that I was practicing witchcraft. He pulls up my Facebook post where I had posted the Harry Potter acceptance letter and tells me that my behavior is borderline demonic. Now, if you know anything about the evangelical world, there's a demon hiding behind almost every door. Now, mind you, I'm at this church almost every day, working for free, making sure this church succeeds. But none of that seemed to matter because I was practicing witchcraft. Now, after about 30 or 45 minutes of him really laying into me, he lets me know that if I'm going to continue with this kind of behavior, I have no place at their church. I was completely stunned. I've known this pastor my entire life. I was raised by my grandparents and they were elders at that church for almost 30 years. But just like that, because of one Harry Potter letter, I was on the verge of being excommunicated. Now, what I haven't said yet is one of my closest friends, who was the on-staff paid worship leader, was sitting just a few offices down waiting for me to tell him what happened. Apparently, the pastor didn't clue him in either. So after feeling completely beat up, shocked and dumbfounded, I walk out of the pastor's office with my head low and walk into my friend's office to tell him what happened. I tell him about the letter and how the pastor told me I'm practicing witchcraft. My friend sits back in his chair, sighs, and says, "Oh man." He looks me dead in the face and says, "I don't agree with the pastor, and I think how he handled this was wrong. But it is our job as faithful Christians to do what he says." I think in that moment I almost had an out-of-body experience because I could not believe what I was hearing. That worship leader, a good friend at the time, was siding with the pastor even though he admitted that he was dead wrong. Me and that worship leader had watched Harry Potter before together. We'd watched plenty of movies together that were not church appropriate. It wasn't uncommon for him and I to have a beer now and then, even though that went strictly against church policy. It almost goes without saying, but that was the beginning of the end of that friendship. The hypocrisy and the double standard was staring me right in the face. That worship leader, one of my best friends at the time, didn't disagree with my conduct, didn't even say what I did was wrong. He openly admits that the pastor is in the wrong, but then tells me it's my Christian duty to support that pastor. I think the worship leader and the pastor's expectation is that I would take all this to heart, repent of my ways, pull the Harry Potter post down, eat some dirt, and continue to be a good Christian servant at the church. However, that's not what happened. Honestly, I came to the end of my rope. I had had internal struggles about the evangelical world and that specific church for a while, but just chose to keep it all inside because I wanted to fill my Christian service. All the while being manipulated to work for free and have my behavior controlled in whatever way they saw fit. I ended up leaving the church, marrying my wife, and never really speaking to that pastor or that worship leader again. I tell this story not to throw any particular individual under the bus, but to show how the evangelical world can manipulate and control people with the smallest of things. They took a cutesy letter from a popular book and movie franchise and turned it into me practicing witchcraft and dabbling in demonic activity. What's interesting is that this story is far from unique. I've had tons of friends and tons of you in the comments tell me you've gone through similar situations or even worse. Statistically, the evangelical world in America is regressing, and you can't tell me that abuse and manipulation like this are not a huge factor on why people are walking away. And even though this story sounds silly, I had to walk away from people that I considered family, completely disconnect from a community, and have tons of friends completely cut off contact with me because I was in rebellion. So what do you think? Was I in the wrong for not putting my head down and continue to be a good little Christian? Or did I have all right to walk away? Let me know in the comments if you've had similar experiences. So many of us ex-evangelicals are told to keep quiet about these kind of things, but I think in telling our stories, we can actually create a community of people who know that they're not alone when it comes to church abuse. Until next time, see you later.